Welcome to day 9 of our scripture reading and encouragement. Today we're covering Genesis chapter 25 and 26, and then we're covering in the New Testament Matthew 10, verses 1 through 25. So we'll jump right in. We pick up the story in Genesis where Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac has to go to God and ask God for favor over his wife because she can't give birth. And God blesses her with twins. So we see the beginning of the story of Jacob and Esau, and they're born here. And it's funny, it actually references we know through Scripture, and we're going to read about this over the next couple of days, but they have a brotherly feud that lasts their entire lives. But it's just funny to me that it starts in the womb. It says that they basically fought in the womb. And then we see, something we might see in today's world, parents showing favoritism. It says basically Jacob was a mama's boy and Esau was a daddy's boy. But one thing that we learn from the scripture, if you dig into it a little bit, is Jacob's name actually means deceiver. And we'll see him be a bit of a deceiver early in his life. And there becomes a point, and we'll get to it soon, but there becomes a point when God changes his name. And I think that's really significant because a lot of us, we know back when we were reading early in Genesis, we're born with a sin nature in us. And Jacob was born with that nature. He was born with that nature to deceive. And we see that early on when he tricks Esau out of his birthright with the stew. He takes advantage. So it's not that he necessarily did something, he didn't outright lie and that sort of thing, but he tricked him. So that's a level of deceit. And we see it later in this story coming up the next few days when he tricks Esau out of his blessing. So it's just interesting because we're going to start walking through Jacob's life and see this transition from deceiver to what God wanted him to become. And I think that's something that we need to look at seriously because that applies to a lot of us. If you would have looked at me 10, 15 years ago, I would have had a different name. When I was in business and I was chasing the world and I was chasing money, I might manipulate people to benefit me. But as God changed my heart and changed my life, he gave me a new name, so to speak. Now, for us, we don't literally get a name change like he would have done with Abram to Abraham or Jacob's name meaning deceiver and transitioning to Israel. But I think we can get some significance out of it or similarities out of it of we have to allow God to change that sin nature into us and give us a new name. So we see there's a famine and Isaac is driven from his land. And, he follows in the footsteps of his dad. His wife is beautiful. He's scared they're going to kill him to get her in a foreign land. So he says, this is my sister. And it's crazy. I don't know what to do with this information, but it's like Isaac was deceitful, just like Abraham, but God still blessed him out of it. God actually used that circumstance to provide protection because when the king found out that, when he looks out his window and he sees Isaac caressing her and he goes to Isaac and he says, wait a second, this isn't your sister, it's your wife. Why would you do this to us? God uses that circumstance and the king actually puts protection over Isaac. He tells anyone if they touch Isaac or Rebekah, they'll die. So it's just funny to see that even in our imperfections, I'm encouraged, and I hope you are too, that sometimes God will use those circumstances when we're not doing the right thing to actually provide for us, whether it's protection or what have you. What we're seeing as a theme in this Old Testament that's going to just continue to evolve, and it does apply to our lives as well, is that things are not easy for God's chosen people. God didn't just hand deliver all this stuff to Abraham and to Isaac. We're starting to see that it was a struggle. They had to move from place to place. They had to trust God. And I think as those obstacles get in our way, those trials get in our way, and we have to go out on faith and go to different places, it's a way God builds our trust in him. He always provided for them. He always saw them through the difficulty, just like he always provides for us and sees us through the difficulty. But he needs us to go through these trials to build our faith. All right, now we're going to switch over to Matthew chapter 10. And again, it's just verses 1 through 25 today of Matthew 10. But Jesus has just come off in chapter 9 of telling the disciples that the workers are few. The harvest is great. There's a ton out there, but the workers are few. And then he immediately sends his disciples out to the people of Israel. And he's very specific. I'm not sending you to the Gentiles. I'm not sending you to the Samaritans. And we know later in the story, Jesus came for the people of Israel. When they rejected him, that's what opened up us as Gentiles and the Samaritans to be able to have Jesus. But at this point, he's sending out his disciples to the people of Israel. He gave them authority to do everything he had done: heal the sick, raise the dead, cure leprosy, cast out demons. This is the authority that I mentioned the other day that he eventually gives to us as well. But at this point, he's had the authority. He's now delegating that authority to his disciples and sending them out. And I think this could be a huge message, or should be a huge message to us. We rely on Jesus for healing. We rely on the power of his name. But Jesus was very clear to the disciples here: you got to go do it. So we're starting to go from this faith trend to this go do it trend. And I think that's where a lot of us fail, is we believe in Jesus, we know about Jesus, but do we actually do what Jesus says? Do we do what he showed us how to do? He gave us the blueprint. He showed us how to do it. Will we go do it? So he sends out the disciples and he says, don't take anything with you. Don't take any of the necessities you think you would take, because you're going to be dependent on me. And he says, wherever you go, receive their hospitality, because you're a worker and workers deserve to be fed. But it's really key. He sends them out and he says, if you go into a home, and that's a worthy person, bless their home and stay there until you leave. But if it turns out to not be a worthy home, take the blessing back. And I'm going to pick up in verse 14. He says, if any household or town refuses to welcome you or listen to your message, shake its dust from your feet as you leave. I think that is something we need to be encouraged from. Sometimes we go out and we witness or we tell someone about Jesus, and when they reject what we tell them, we get discouraged and we get down, and it affects us. It may keep us from going on and witnessing to other people. And Jesus is very clear here. When you go there, you tell them about me. If they reject the message, you leave, shake the dust from your feet. He goes on to say they're going to be worse off than Sodom and Gomorrah. That's bad. So I want you to be encouraged. If you are telling family members, friends, coworkers about Jesus, and if they reject the message, don't get down. Don't think you failed. That's what Satan's going to do. He's going to try to make you think you've done something wrong. Just simply move on. Move on to the next person. Shake the dust from your feet. It doesn't mean you don't care for them or care what they think, but don't get prideful that they didn't believe that you didn't do a good enough job, or let rejection set in that you didn't do something right. Simply move on to the next town, so to speak, the next person. And I think we need to we need to gain from that. The final thing that Jesus focuses on here is he's telling them, starting in verse 16, look, I'm sending you out to a tough place. You're a sheep among wolves. You're going to be handed over to the courts. You're going to be flogged with whips. So he's saying there's a cost. He's already warned us there's a cost to following him. Now he's just saying when you go do it and you go witness to others, there's going to be a cost. And when you do, I'm going to use those circumstances for others to be saved. In other words, if you get arrested, keep preaching the message to the people that arrest you, to the judges. Don't worry about the circumstance. You keep doing what you're supposed to do. I will use the circumstance to get you to where you're supposed to be. I will use the circumstance to bring others to Christ. So I want you to be encouraged. Sometimes we don't understand God's plan. We don't understand why he moves us from place to place, like he's moving Abraham and Isaac around. Sometimes we don't understand how we do something wrong, but we still get blessed by God out of it, kind of like Jacob tricking his brother. Sometimes we don't understand why when we witness to people, we get in trouble, or we get taken to a place we don't think we should have to go, or we get persecuted. But I want you to have just encouragement today to know that God's plan is beyond our understanding. And sometimes he uses those bad circumstances to get us to the very place we wouldn't normally go, so we can witness and love on the people that we wouldn't normally love on. So be encouraged by that today. If you're in a tough spot, keep telling them about Jesus, because maybe God put you in that tough spot. Maybe he allowed you to go through what you're going through because that's what he needed you to go through to get to where he needs you to be. Does that make sense? Keep doing what you're doing is what I'm saying. Be blessed. Have a great day.